Hi, everybody. We're gonna let people filter in for just about 2 minutes, so we'll just hang tight for just a couple minutes.
Sounds perfect, Ron. I know this is Ron's meeting, but I'd like to jump in very quickly. And Dean, thank you for doing this. We appreciate all the trouble you've gone to put together a program, and we've got looks like several dozen people very interested in listening.
Thank you, Steve. It's good to see you. I haven't seen you for a long time, but I appreciate your welcome. I'm happy to be here. Many of the people that I'm seeing names pop up are my friends, and so I've known some of you for a long time.
Great.
And I'm a little concerned about Nicole Larson's picture though, because it looks like there's a wild animal about to pounce from a high perch.
Nicole, you're muted.
That's how she is.
Yeah. Well, we won't be able to hear her scream when the animal leaps.
Yes, that's Marco Polo.
Oh, okay. Well, I think we've located him.
His brother may join us too. Very
So
wild.
it's 6:02. Tanya, is there a couple more people? I'll give it one more minute. Actually, I'm seeing it empty right now.
I think we're good to
Um,
go.
let's get started. Um, Welcome everybody to an evening with Dean Nelson. This is a program sponsored by the San Diego Press Club. Thank you all for coming. It is a fascinating and also troubling time in the media, both at a national and local level. Our guest, Dean Nelson, is one of the best people in town to try to help put it all in perspective for us. So my name is Ron Donahoe. I'm editor of the San Diego Sun. We're going to have nearly an hour conversation with Dean, and I'm going to save time at the end for questions. So please hold those questions. But you can put them on the record by entering them in the chat. And Tanya Castaneda is monitoring the chat and will help get those questions to us at the end. Please do not speak out or ask questions during the program. Again, Tanya, who is nicknamed the Enforcer, is prepared to handle anybody that doesn't mute or interrupts. So thank you for helping this run smoothly. Um, Last introductory note. Tonight is about the state of media. We'll be mentioning stories that are in the headlines, but this is not a town hall on ICE or Greenland or the Epstein files. This is about how the media does its job. So again, one of the people who knows the most about media that I know is Dean Nelson. Dean, hello.
Hello, Ron. Hello, all of you at the press club. I used to be on the board of the press club, but I couldn't make I couldn't make the meetings. So I hope this counts as making one of the meetings.
There's always a spot for you, Dean.
Yeah, good, good,
We're
good.
holding a spot for you.
It's good to
Um,
see everybody.
Let me mention just that you have a very long resume. Let me just mention a couple of the highlights. You're the founder and the director of the journalism program at Point Loma Nazarene University. You are the author of 14 books, including the two-part series Talking to Writers.
I happen to have them right here,
There it is.
Ron.
I knew,
Look
I
at
knew.
those right there.
And your book before those two was Talk to Me, how to ask better questions, get better answers, and interview anyone like a pro. Um, you're also the host of Point Loma's annual Writers Symposium by the Sea. So there's a lot more that could be said about you, but we only have an
That's
hour.
enough. Yeah, that's enough.
Um, talk about how you became the founder of the journalism department at Point Loma. How'd that come about?
Yeah, I was working as a business reporter, business writer in Minneapolis, and Point Loma Nazarene University contacted me in part because I had gone to the University of Missouri's journalism school, and Point Loma had just adopted a journalism program, and they thought this would be a good step for their English and writing majors and stuff, and give them a good vocational outlet. Which back in the '80s it really was. It was a brilliant move, and so they asked me to do some consulting with them on the curriculum, and so I gave them some feedback, and then a couple months later they said, "Hey, we're doing interviews for people to come and get this thing off the ground and get started. Do you want to come out and interview?" And in all honesty, and this is probably every Californian's story, my wife and I felt like, well, we would regret not at least coming out here for a little while, and
Sure.
then we would go back to what was familiar in Minnesota. And so I came out and interviewed and gave a lecture on the topic of interviewing, as it turned out, and so they hired me. So we came out and thought, okay, we'll do this for a couple of years and then go back. But it was so life-giving and so important, and I loved getting to know so many people in the media here in San Diego that I just kind of got pulled into the whole media culture here. I loved it. I loved it. It wasn't
You
just
do.
the weather.
You're involved with a lot of things. I want to know how you
Yeah.
found time to write 14 books.
Yeah, not all of them are really good books, Ron. So
Well, that's
I
how you
wouldn't,
do it.
yeah, I wouldn't. I wouldn't recommend all of them. But no, after a while, the school realizes, you've got some value in talking about these things. So the school has worked really well with me to accommodate writing time and all. So, when I first came back in the '80s and early '90s, I was also a stringer for the New York Times and the Boston Globe. So I was doing a lot of stuff on the border and elsewhere in the Southwest, and so I just got a lot of yeah. The school was just very accommodating to that. So that's how that worked out.
So probably a lot of people on this Zoom know about the Writers Symposium by the Sea, but I'll give you a second to plug it because I know it's coming up, right?
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's really the most fun week of the year for me. It's where we bring in great writers and have them talk about the craft. So this year we have Judy Woodruff coming in from PBS. You think she'll have anything to talk about
I love Judy
after
Woodruff.
her years of covering the White House and now with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting dissolving? And yeah, so she's so articulate and so smart. So she's coming. Jamaica Kincaid from the New Yorker is coming. I think she'll have something to say about immigration. And she's just a great writer anyway, and is kind of part of the canon in a lot of high schools. And then the big one is George Saunders, who has a new novel coming out next week, I believe. And he had a big feature in the New York Times Sunday Magazine. George Saunders is going to be just a superstar. So we bring these writers in. I do interviews with them in front of an audience, and basically the purpose is to celebrate and inspire and model great writing, so that after you've had an encounter with these great writers, you can feel like, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. That's the goal.
Excellent. And what was the date on that?
February 25, 26, and 27. Coming up, you can go to Writers Symposium by the Sea. You can just find it online. Tickets are on sale now.
So, Dean, one of the things you told me about this symposium is that you have all these great writers come and you are on stage with them, but you do not give them the questions ahead of time. Uh,
No.
and I think that's the way it should be.
Hmm.
And that's the way we're doing it tonight. Everybody, Dean knows we're talking about the state of the media, but he doesn't know any specific questions that I'm going to ask him.
That is correct, and I'm very nervous. I'm very, very nervous.
I doubt it. I doubt it.
No, I'm not. But there's the reason for that, and you know this as a journalist, Ron, is you don't want a canned answer. You want something that is going to be authentic and raw and maybe not all that well thought out, but at least it's going to be authentic as opposed to something where somebody has really carefully curated the sentences. You want the real deal. So the only person who actually gave me some real trouble about this, and it wasn't him in particular, it was his handlers, was Deepak Chopra. When we had him at the Writers' Symposium, his people wanted to know every single thing I was going to ask him. And I just wrote back and said, "Yeah, that's not how we do it. We're going to talk about these topics, but that's going to have to be enough." And they kind of threatened to not do it, but he came anyway, and he was fabulous.
I love it. We're starting this off with some dirt on Deepak Chopra.
You
We
can't
made some
do dirt
headlines.
on Deepak. No, it's not dirt. It's just the way he would have preferred to have had prepared answers.
Exactly. Um, so we're going to focus on the role reporters play in covering stories. Occasionally, reporters are the story, and I'm talking about very recently, a Washington Post reporter had her home searched by the FBI. The Justice Department posted that they were looking for information provided by a source who is a Pentagon contractor. The warrant in the case is sealed. Dean, you freelance for the New York Times, right? In
Hmm?
your career. They had a really good article recently about the history of media protections. Um, this was a little bit of news to me. In the 1970s, the Supreme Court actually rejected a case claiming constitutional protections against newsroom searches. However, that case led to a 1980 law that shielded reporters from search warrants, except in the most exceptional circumstances. So the DOJ seems to be testing that exceptional circumstances factor. What does this say about the state of journalism that the Shield law is being tested right now? Dean, one more statement before you answer.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, uh, Supreme Court Justice Byron White, back in 1978, said this. He said, when that case was being struck down in the Supreme Court, he said, "I trust law enforcement not to abuse its power and the news media to fight back if abuses occur." So Supreme Court justices were so cute and naive back in the 70s, weren't they? What do you think about the case with the Washington Post reporter?
Yeah, I look at that and say, yeah, it's disturbing and it's unconstitutional, and it as the way things are interpreted these days, it won't that kind of a warrant and search won't stand up in court. But in the meantime, you've got a reporter uh, getting their place broken into and searched. Here's what I keep coming back to though, Ron, is this isn't the first time this kind of thing has happened. I mean, you're probably not old enough to remember when the feds raided Stanford University's student newspaper and took their files and took their notes and
Yeah, that was what led to the 1978 Supreme Court case.
yeah, exactly. So my point is we should be disturbed by this, but we shouldn't necessarily be surprised by it because authoritarian governments do this all the time. Richard Nixon did this. Eugene McCarthy did this. There was our country has a history of this kind of adversarial relationships, and really any free country has had this kind of conflict with these people who aren't elected to anything, who just shine this bright spotlight of public scrutiny on something. And when you want to hide, that's really annoying to have journalists keep you from hiding.
Yeah.
So it's disturbing and it's wrong and it won't stand up, but it's also not new.
It's not new. We had a case in San Diego in 2018. You're called the very, very good freelancer Kelly Davis had done a series of stories on jail deaths. And the county of San Diego tried to get her to give up her notes that included her sources. And it went to court. She won. But, why is it so important for a reporter and for the public to be able to keep their notes confidential?
Uh, because why would someone trust us if they thought that eventually all this was going to get turned over to law enforcement? I mean, that's just absurd. So the thing about Kelly's case, she had the California Shield Law in her favor, and not every state has a shield law. There about 40 of the states have shield laws. I can't remember what the exact number is right now, but those shield laws say you have some protections in keeping your notes and your outtakes and your files. You have protection in keeping those away. Let's say you're covering gangs and and you get some really good sourcing, and then the cops come along and say, "Who'd you talk to?" And we want names and all that. Do you think those gangs are ever going to trust not just you, but any reporter after that? Of course not. That's why we've got to have those. Now, here's where the conflict is. The conflict is if there's a trial going on and prosecutors want, to make the best case they can make, they've got a Sixth Amendment that says you've got a right to a fair trial. And not just prosecutors, defense attorneys the same way. You've got a right to a fair trial. Well, we've got a First Amendment and a Shield law that says, yeah, but I don't have to cooperate with you. And so some judge has to decide then what's going to be the best route here, which freedom is going to win here, the right to a fair trial or the right for reporters to keep their sources anonymous. That's a toughie, and that just gets resolved on a case by case basis.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing we're seeing on the national level is politicians openly showing disdain to reporters, calling them names during press conferences. Things like,
Biggie,
Are
wasn't
you
that one?
stupid?
Yeah,
Are you a stupid person? You're fake
yeah,
news." I mean, the
right.
worst was maybe, be quiet, piggy. Uh,
Right.
how did we get here?
Yeah, we're just gonna have to weather this storm. I think it was Winston Churchill who said, "When you're going through hell, keep moving," and that's I think that's the only way you can do it. And you just have to keep doing good journalism, regardless of the mockery and the disdain. Not everybody is gonna love what we do. I mean. I voted for Obama, but Obama was not a very good friend to journalists. There were some real conflicts between the Obama administration and journalists, not in this very public, disdainful, scornful way that made people really want to hate us. But he wasn't the best friend of us either.
Hmm. Um, why do you think reporters, I mean, and maybe it's obvious on a national level, but why do reporters allow this to happen on camera, especially? I mean, do they have recourse? And I mean, to localize it, what can or should a reporter here in San Diego do if faced with some sort of verbal abuse by an interview subject?
Yeah, again, this is one of those deals where you just have to weather this storm, but you also have to hold these people accountable. The fact that we know that President Trump called somebody piggy or called somebody stupid or mocked somebody with a disability in his first term, or gave the finger to somebody at General Motors not too long ago. I mean, that's not a very distinguished kind of presidential thing to do. The point is, you have to keep showing it. You just have to keep showing it. And that's what I mean about the bright spotlight of public scrutiny. You just have to keep reporting it. And at some point, you hope that the public will say, is this how we want our presidents to act? Maybe not.
Yeah, and on the flip side, I know you're happy to play devil's advocate sometimes.
Sure.
What role have reporters played in the press conference interview dynamic? I mean, no one should be no one should be called demeaning names, but the press asks so many gotcha questions and leading questions and sensationalized questions, you know. Interview subjects perhaps have gotten tired of it. Is there some justification for interviewees getting fed up with reporter questions?
I love this question. I really do, Ron. I don't think anything justifies the kind of mockery and name calling that has come about. But I do think I've seen interviews and you have too, I assume, where that sort of sensationalist kind of gotcha kind of thing seemed to be the point. Not, can we get some real understanding? Can we get some complexity? Can we get some kind of nuance here? Can we get some understanding? That wasn't the point. I like to think of it this way. Difficult questions are necessary, but heat for heat's sake is sort of not very useful. That's the gotcha. Okay, I trapped you in some sort of a contradiction or whatever. But heat for light's sake is a completely different proposition. And I'm all for asking difficult questions, but I agree with you. I think there are some times when certain reporters, and I'll do it on both sides. Certain reporters just want to provoke. And there are other reporters who just want to genuflect and just praise and worship. Neither one of those extremes shed any light. So I'm all for asking hard questions in a manner that is not disdainful, uh, but asking the tough question anyway. They're expecting it. It's not like you're surprising them when you ask a tough question.
Sure,
In fact, I think they'll actually respect you if you ask a difficult question.
sure. CBS has had some problems. Last week, the CBS Evening News's new anchor, Tony DeCopel, did a 13-minute interview with the president. Afterwards, New York Times reported that the president's press secretary told CBS to run the interview in full or a lawsuit would be coming. Your response to that?
Yeah, I saw that news as well. We have to keep in mind, well, two things come to mind when I think about that. One is this is not the first time CBS News has caved. Uh, and we everybody thinks, did you ever think 60 Minutes would just kind of cave the way they did? And I'm thinking, yeah, remember the tobacco company story?
Hmm.
They didn't run that either because they were afraid of getting sued. Everything about that story was buttoned down and airtight and verified and accurate. And they still didn't run it when they said they were going to because of a threat of a lawsuit from a tobacco company. So it's just like I've seen this movie, and eventually 60 Minutes ran that tobacco story about Jeffrey Wigand, and now here we are, 60 Minutes. This is not the question you asked, but it's related.
Mhm.
60 Minutes went ahead and ran that story that Barry Weiss had said wasn't ready. And then they ran it in its original form.
Yeah, 2 days
So
ago.
yeah, exactly. So which is less time than they did on the tobacco company thing. So the reason for that obviously is that somebody had leaked that video and it was already out there.
It was out in
So
Canada. Yeah.
exactly. So the thing about running an entire interview, it reminds me of something uh, Ben Bradley said. He was the former editor of the Washington Post during the Watergate years. He said, if somebody comes to me and says, I was at a City Club event with Ben Bradley, and he said this at this event. He said, if somebody comes to me and says, Ben, I've got a hell of a story, and it's going to just blow the top off of the oil companies, and it's going to cost you millions and millions of dollars to defend it. He said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to run it. So you've got a similar kind of thing with this person saying, run that entire 13 minutes with Donald Trump, or we're going to sue you. Well, the news media in this country is a business. This is capitalism at work. CBS News is not going to risk having to spend millions and millions of dollars to defend a Donald Trump lawsuit. So what are they going to do? They're going to run all 13 minutes.
Yeah. In terms of process, news organizations do, routinely edit responses. Talk a little bit about what's acceptable in editing a response. Even quotes from an interview. There was the 1991 Supreme Court case that involved New York Magazine. It ruled that a reporter can legally shorten a quote for readability or
Sure.
clarity. But you can't change the meaning or the intent. Or you can, like you were saying, face legal risk. How do you walk the line on editing responses?
Yeah, I love this question because when when reporters quote people, I tell this in my journalism classes. When reporters quote people, our dirty secret is when we use this sentence that says, comma, close quote, she said, and then we pick up the next sentence. They didn't necessarily say those two things right together like that.
Hmm.
That second quote may have come from several minutes later, but it helps make the point and balance out that first comment. So that kind of what I call compression of a quote, others would call it editing, whatever. I think that's perfectly acceptable. And I think
Hmm.
reporters do that all the time. Where the BBC got in trouble, where they got sued for their documentary about the January 6th riots, where the BBC got in trouble was they took a quote at the top of Donald Trump's speech and a quote at the bottom of that speech. And there was like 56 minutes in between there of other stuff that got said, and put those two sentences together and made it sound like it all came in the same sentence. That actually distorted the impact and
Yeah.
the meaning, and and was it made it sort of in not sort of made it inaccurate, and that's why the BBC got sued. So I'm all for editing for clarity, but not editing just so that you can make the point you've already decided you want to make.
Yes. Let's focus on local news now. There are some new outlets in San Diego.
Yours,
Uh,
for instance,
yes, the San Diego Sun. Thank you for that plug.
I love it.
Um, there's some new outlets, some with different levels of manpower than they used to have. I want to ask you, Dean, to give your um, state of the city overview on San Diego media. I'll have some specific questions for you after your state of the city's media. But what jumps to mind?
The word fragmentation comes to mind. And while I personally would love to have one big kind of mega news outlet that is the paper of record And I'm the one who said I don't want to talk about the old days, but I do like the fact that there is a New York Times or a Washington Post or something that kind of gathers a whole bunch of stuff together. We don't have something in San Diego as strong as we used to, but that doesn't necessarily mean things aren't getting covered. So I look at the San Diego Union Tribune has fewer reporters and editors than it used to. Okay, fine. But Voice of San Diego does some really good work and some very, very important work. And then you've got iNews Source that's doing all this investigative stuff. And then you've got Inside Climate News, and then you've got Inquire First, and then you've got the San Diego Sun, your deal downtown. And then you have the Times of San Diego and all of those small regional little community papers that now have an infusion of money from the Cronkite School of Journalism at ASU. There are actually a lot of reporters out there. Now, they're not all covering necessarily the things I'm interested in, but they're covering really, really important stuff. So I think not to mention the television stations and KPBS, there's some really good reporting going on, but it isn't in that same everybody's looking at the same screen, everybody's looking at the same page kind of way.
Yeah, you have answered a couple of the next few questions I was going to ask you, but let me just ask you succinctly. Um, is the Union Tribune still the newspaper of record or the news outlet of record in San Diego?
Well, I think so. I think so. Not everybody would agree with me. Is it as robust as it was? No, but I mean, it went through some actually worse years. When Doug Manchester owned the paper, it was an embarrassment. And now, it's owned by a hedge fund. So it's at least they're not saying um, uh, you have to promote San Diego at all costs. I mean, they still have they still have, in my opinion, some questionable decisions. Laura Castaneda, why isn't she working for the Union Tribune anymore? Because there was an op-ed piece apparently about ICE raids that the management, not local management, but the hedge fund management didn't like. So that's all problematic. I do, to answer your question, I still think the Union Tribune is kind of the paper of record. It's the compendium of the most kinds of sources and stories that's going on. Do other outlets cover separate segments of San Diego better? Yeah, probably. But I still look to the Union Tribune for general news about what's happening in this community.
Yeah, you mentioned Times of San Diego.
Uh-huh.
Full disclosure, I do freelance for Times of San Diego. Um, y- I'll just flesh out what you said a little bit. That website acquired a chain of local newspapers. It was called the San Diego Community Newspaper Group. Then that whole package was merged into what's called Newswell, like you said, from Arizona State. You know. What do you see as the future for the Times of San Diego as a local news provider?
I think it's actually going to get bigger, and they're going to get more confidence, and they're going to hire more people, and I think it and competition is good when it comes to San Diego. Well, really, when it comes to journalism in general. So I think they'll cover some things that Voice of San Diego is not covering, that the Union Tribune is not covering. Uh, and they will do those community stories probably better than those other bigger outlets because they're based in La Jolla or Mission Hills or Ocean Beach. So I think actually things are looking up for some of the communities.
Let's talk about nonprofit news.
Uh-huh.
Another full disclosure, my site has fiscal sponsorship and a nonprofit arm. Um, you mentioned the Voice of San Diego. They've been a nonprofit model, a national model,
They
for
kind of started it.
yeah, for more than 2 decades.
Yeah.
You also mentioned iNewsSource. I think they've been at it as a nonprofit for 16 years. What do you see as the future for the nonprofit news model?
I think it's actually going to increase. I think a lot of eyes are on the nonprofit that's in Baltimore, the Baltimore Banner, because a very wealthy person is bankrolling that and said that he would for X number of years, and they're doing great reporting. St. Louis has a nonprofit similar to Voice of San Diego. Minneapolis has one. There are very, very similar nonprofit news organizations all over the country. The 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 problem is that they aren't very big. So they have to choose what are the topics they're really going to dig into
Mhm.
that the community cares about. Education, local politics. They aren't going to cover sports. They aren't going to cover crime, local business, things like that. So they have to be very choosy as to what are the areas they're going to dig into. And I think there's going to be a lot of that. I don't know if you remember, Ron, but several years ago, Malin Burnham proposed buying, getting a whole bunch of wealthy people to buy the Union Tribune
Was that
and run
before
it.
Doug Manchester
Or
bought it?
I think it was either right before or right after. I can't
Uh-huh.
remember. But it was during that era where he just thought if you make this a philanthropic kind of thing, where it's actually a public service, you could actually make this thing go and make it profitable and all. And I don't know if it's because San Diego doesn't have the number of millionaires that or billionaires that other cities do. I mean, it's him and Irwin Jacobs, right? And Craig Ventnor. I don't know who else is out there, but he never could get any traction with that idea. I still think it's a good idea. Now here's the other side of this. I'll play my own devil's advocate. So Craig Newmark, the guy who started Craigslist and who has funded several journalism organizations, just announced that he was pulling his funding
Hmm.
because the audiences weren't growing, and so we have to figure out a better business model if we're going to attract somebody who will fund something as a nonprofit or as a philanthropist or whatever to grow the audience, and what that means is you just have to do amazing work on social media. That's the only way you're going to grow the audience.
Hmm. Um, Dean, I want to ask you your opinion about covering homelessness. This question's long, so hang on for a second. Something I did not know until recently is that your son is a reporter for the UT and he covers homelessness. Um, Blake Nelson. Um,
I've heard of him. He's brilliant.
yes, good lineage. Um, For 2 decades before him, Gary Worth covered that beat for the Union Tribune, and those are big shoes to fill. I pay a lot of attention to how homelessness is covered, and Gary was a source of institutional knowledge. Another reporter I should mention who's extremely good on the topic is Lisa Halverstadt at Voice of San Diego.
She's amazing. She knows everything.
So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Blake Nelson has really stepped up quickly to be well informed, and I look for his stories when he's writing about homelessness. I can't say the same for all the outlets in town, whether it's TV, print, or digital. Homelessness is complex. You can't just step out into the field and start reporting and then find a ray of positive hope and then end your story with some sort of
Yeah.
line that says, "Looks like we've solved it.
Yeah.
Everything's great."
Right.
Or
Right.
something
Right.
like that. So, sorry for the long question, but
That's
how
okay.
do you educate a reporter? How do you get them to step into a beat and cover something as complex as homelessness?
I go back to the guy we talked about 60 Minutes a while ago. I go back to Don Hewitt, the guy who started 60 Minutes. And he said something uh, that has stuck with me whenever I'm dealing with something like a complex issue, whether it's homelessness or whether it's crime or whether it's things at the border or whatever. His his comment was, I don't care about issues. I don't care about issues. He said, I care about how issues affect people.
Hmm.
And so he said he learned this from reading the Old Testament. John Hewitt was Jewish. He said, reading the Old Testament, he said, the issue in the Bible, for instance, was evil in the world, but the story was Noah. He said, I'm interested in the story. And so the way, in my opinion, you cover something as insolvable and complex as homelessness is you make it about people. And it could be the people who are living in the encampments. It could be the people who are trying to bring them water and food and blankets. It could be the people who are sweeping up after them. But the only way anybody's going to care about the issue of homelessness is if you take it out of the policy wonkish budget stuff, which is all necessary. You got to have that in there. But nobody's going to read it unless it's about how does homelessness land on a somebody? And you've got to make it about a somebody. And I think that's what Blake does well. I think that's what Lisa does well. I think that's what you do well with your work with San Diego Sun is it's not about issues. It's about how people are affected by issues. If you can focus there. Now, here's the thing, and you brought this up. You're not going to solve the issue of homelessness, but you're going to bear witness to the importance of the human cost of this. And that's, in my opinion, sometimes all you can do is just bear witness to it.
Okay, I'm waiting for the 60-minute piece on Noah. That's going to be fascinating.
How do you get all those animals in there?
Um, you and I have talked about this in the past. Talk to me about young reporters, or I guess any reporter, who should be reporting facts rather than opinion. I mean, that's one of your primary tenets that you teach, yes?
It is. It is. It is. I from the first week of introduction to journalism class, I pound this into their heads that nobody cares what you think. Tell me the story. Verify the story. Make it interesting. Make it compelling. Put these most important facts first, and then the next most important facts. Verify, 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 and make it interesting. Now, if later they become commentators or influencers or whatever term we want to call it, that's fine. But they have to prove to me first that they can tell a story that could be very, very divisive, and I not be able to tell what their opinion is. We start there.
It's fun. It's so funny that you mentioned influencers because I was going to ask you about influencers, or as I was corrected the other day when I was speaking to someone who I thought was an influencer, and she told me that no, she's a content creator, not an influencer. So tomato,
Noted.
tomato, tomato.
Mhm.
Um, where's the place for content creators in the media landscape? And I forget where I was reading it, but was reading a story the other day about newspapers very eager to start partnering with content creators or influencers, whichever you want to call them.
They should. They should. That's the only way you're going to grow your audience because there's a certain age level and below where the only information they're getting about how the world works, about their community works, is either YouTube, TikTok videos, Instagram, or something that someone has passed along to them in some media forum. And so we have to partner with these folks. But What we also have to do is make sure that what is being posted and said is verified and accurate. So a lot of times I think an influencer or a content creator or a public relations person or whatever feel like they can just put their version of an event out there. I like what Bob Woodward said years ago, which and I know I keep referring to the old days, but I'm an old guy. But Bob Woodward one time said, "We don't tell the truth as journalists. We tell the best obtainable version of the truth at the time." That's a lot of qualifiers. And a content creator or an influencer or whatever is not going to give you those layers. So if you do partner with those folks, you've got to make sure you've got those other layers somewhere in your storytelling. I will say this other thing, and this probably is not related to anything you were going to ask me, and that is people still want to read stories. People still want to read well-told stories, well-told true stories. And so if a content creator, an influencer, whatever, can tell a story in an interesting and a compelling way, I think that's valuable.
Tanya, I'm looking at the clock, and we were going to cut to. Do we have a good number of questions in the chat right now, Tanya?
I have four great questions for you.
Four great questions. Okay, let me ask one more, and then we're going to go to the chat. Um, so, Dean, before we go to the chat questions, um, what are we going to do in newsrooms with AI? I mean, it's scary to realize how easy it is for AI tools to make mistakes. But I talk to proponents who say there are processes that AI can take on that can make a reporter's job easier and can do certain tasks faster. Where do you come down on AI?
It's here. Everybody's using it. We just have to make sure that we're being really open about when we're using it. And I'll give you an example of how much easier it is on some things. I had a reporter from KUSI, one of our alums, in a journalism class just this past semester, and she took a police report, put it up on a screen in front of the class. And, it was just these facts. It wasn't interesting. It wasn't in a story form. It was just these facts from a pedestrian that had been hit. There was a hit and run, and the pedestrian was hurt, and it was on Pacific Highway. And and so she said to the students, "All right, write a sort of an inverted pyramid, a summary lead, most important fact, next most important fact, next most important fact." So out of this information, attribute it to the police. So the students labored over this. It took them probably 10 minutes, and most of them came up with something pretty good, pretty good. And then she took that same information and put it in Chat GPT. And in about 3 seconds, it had a pretty good story. And here's the problem. It got some things wrong. And it called it Pacific Coast Highway, not Pacific Highway. I mean, it's just scrubbing from what's already in there. And it wasn't interesting, it wasn't compelling, but it did get the job done.
Hmm.
So my point is on certain things, like maybe those uh, kind of police scanner stories that we do, maybe that's as long as somebody's verifying what's getting said. I know that sports has used it for years to summarize game scores. That just takes the stats of the game
Hmm.
and puts it together in a 3 or 4 paragraph story. So everybody's using it. We should be open and accountable to the public when we do use it.
Hmm.
But my gosh, if we depend on it, we've got a real problem because they get some stuff wrong.
Right, right. So real quick follow-up. So if you turn AI loose on a story, you think it's legit. to have an editor go over that AI story. And not
Legit and necessary.
well, what I was going to say, not an intern
Oh,
who
right, right, right.
who doesn't really know the lay of the land yet, but and some editor go over the AI story. Then you think that's a good use of AI.
I think it's an acceptable use of AI.
Good answer. Good answer. Um, Dean, I'm going to turn this over to Tanya to read us some questions from the chat. Tanya,
Okay.
it's all you.
All right. Well, thank you. This has been a great discussion. I have to call on Jerry McCormick. He has put a question in the chat. He is a part-time journalism teacher and our good friend. And Jerry says that his students want to be influencers and not journalists, some of them. And he wants to know, with things being kind of a mess, how can he inspire them to pursue a career in media?
Yeah, I love the question, and I think that is sort of the dominant thing with students anyway. It's not unique to you, Jerry. I feel you. Um, I do think in a good journalism class, you can show the importance of actually doing reporting where you get multiple sources and you put this in you talk about important issues, not just the things that you want to talk about and influence people to buy these leggings. And so I think the class that you have to teach them says, okay, yeah, that's fine. If you want to be an influencer, that's fine. But before we get there, I'm going to show you how to be a reporter. They may not want to go into news, but the thing is, Jerry, they might. They might kind of get bit by that bug that says, hey, actually talking to people and not just promoting products and ideas, that's kind of interesting too. So keep up the good work. I know you. I know you're a good teacher. Uh, Assume that eventually they'll see the value of being good reporters.
Okay, and a related question. Sorry, go ahead, Ron.
I was just going to say, from your lips to the youth ears, Dean.
Let's hope. All right, what's next, Tanya?
And a very related question from Matt Brown was he is concerned that the younger generation of journalists is really avoiding that idea of true objective news reporting. He wonders if there's going to be a shortage of journalists who really believe in being objective.
Well, I, I'm just going to say it. I don't think there's such a thing as objectivity. I never have thought that journalists were objective. So, but you got to hear me out. That doesn't mean we're trying to put out a particular point of view or promote a particular ideology. But think about it. You're covering a story that, let's say it has 10 possible facts in it. You're only going to pick the interesting facts to put in that story. Well, what are you going to base that on? That's not there's a certain subjectivity to the news decision making that we do, and we say there are some criteria for what's going to be news. Conflict is involved, prominence, proximity, timeliness, those kinds of things. Solutions, maybe. So already you're not objective. You're putting this to some sort of subjective criteria. And the other thing is the same thing with quotes. You don't quote everything somebody says in an interview. You take this most interesting statement and this most interesting statement. Well, what are you basing that on? That's not objective. Your own value judgments as a journalist right there keep you from being what people say what's objective. No, we have to make some decisions based on some things. So that's one of the places I start with the students is nobody's objective, but we do have some criteria that we stick with when we decide these facts are important, this story is important, this quote is important. That's got to be based on something.
Great. I want to draw everyone's attention in the comments. There's a link that Jackie Bryant posted on the influencer creator topic. Former border immigration reporter Maya Srikrishnan works for News Creator Corps, a nonprofit that teaches journalism skills, ethics, etc., to topic focused and niche independent creators and influencers. Worth checking out.
Fabulous.
So, not a
Ah,
question, just directing people to that comment.
yeah,
Um,
that's great.
so I have two more very good questions that I'm interested in the answers to. Charlene Pulsinetti, a member of our board and event committee for professional development like this. I want to recognize her. She has a question. She has observed something really concerning. Anonymous individuals reporting on community issues, either as individuals on social media forums or on their own online publication websites. And I've seen this too. As a professional journalist, my concern is that the public is being fed false or divisive information. Also, in some cases, maybe these individuals are actually AI and not even people with real connections to the community. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that's a really important issue, and I also think it's important for reporters to read these things. You know, whether it's the next door kind of stuff or neighborhood kinds of things. Yeah, I look at that sometimes, and I think it's just astonishing some of the baloney that's out there. But there's also some decent stories out there. But what that should do, Charlene, is make us double down on the reporting that we actually do is verified and airtight and double checked. Even if we have to call out some of those sites, it says actually some of this was raised on such and such a site, and it was inaccurate. Calling out folks for inaccurate or provocative kinds of or sensational kinds of statements or comments, I think some accountability would probably be in order.
All right. My final question as of now is from Leah Lowe. I hope I pronounced your last name right. Uh, Leah, feel free to correct me. Can you discuss the impact of Truth Social, that social media platform, on journalism now and going forward?
Yeah, I mean, True Social is the site that President Trump uses. Yeah, you probably have to look at it as much as you can stomach, and and if there are some facts in there that you want to follow up on, fine. I think, for instance, quoting from it about something about Greenland or something about the Nobel Prize or whatever, I think that's fine. That's appropriate. I wouldn't have somebody just use that as a beat with what did he say now? What did he say now? Sometimes that stuff is just a big distraction. But sometimes, you know, it's like going to a city council meeting sometimes. It's a snooze, except for when it's not, you know, and so it's worth monitoring.
That concludes the questions from the chat.
Excellent. Tanya, thank you very much. Thank you for that and all your help on putting this together. Dean, thank you very much for your time. You are
Sure.
definitely the dean of local media.
Well,
Your
thanks.
your parents picked wisely when they chose your name. I know it's not your title.
No, it's a little confusing in the academic world.
I'm just going to wrap things up by saying this has been a presentation from the San Diego Press Club. Check out the Press Club website if you're interested in joining. We will have another media Zoom in the coming months. The date has not yet been determined, but we have lined up our next guests. And I know that one of them is here because she pointed out a great resource in the chat. But our next two guests are a husband and wife team of very accomplished writers who also work in academia. That's Jackie Bryant, who you heard her resource, formerly of San Diego Magazine. I actually think she still works with them. And Jesse Marks, who was with Voice of San Diego. They are married to each other, and they both teach and advise students at San Diego State. So we'll have more information about the next Zoom soon. But thank you, everyone who attended. Again, Tanya and Shar, who helped put this together, and Dean, your words are wise, and we really appreciate you being here.
I always love talking to you, Ron, and I love being with my with my colleagues and friends from the press club. So I enjoyed it, and thanks for your preparation. As an interviewer, I'm going to tell you, you asked good questions. Good job.
Well, I've been watching a guy at the Symposium for years, so it was a good role model. So thank you, Dean. Thank you very much again.
Sure. Sure. Take care.
Thanks,
Gonna end the
everybody.
meeting now. Thanks, everyone.